Really, this house is charming. It gets such good light. Indeed. I want to start living here as soon as possible. While my in-laws laughed cheerfully, Farrell also nodded in satisfaction. Although we came to preview our new home, I hadn't expected it to be such a luxurious residence. As my in-laws and Farrell went ahead with plans on their own, my anxiety grew. Are we really going to buy this house? Unable to hide my confusion, Linda, our agent, quietly said to me, "Ma, let's talk in another room. There's something about the contract we need to discuss." Surprised by Linda's serious expression, I nodded. Led to a separate room, I was filled with anxiety. I thought she might press me for an immediate contract. However, what she said was completely unexpected. "You should run away immediately." What? Confused by her unexpected words, I asked, "Run away? What do you mean?" "I'm sorry for startling you so suddenly, but I've witnessed something." Linda began with an uneasy tone. The content of her words was shocking. "My name is Pamela Moore. I am 32 years old this year. My husband, Farrell, is the same age as me, and while we don't have children yet, we are seriously discussing buying our own house soon. I have been longing for the charm of a downtown apartment, but Farrell prefers a detached house with more privacy. This is particularly because of Farrell's parents. My mother-in-law, Hazel, is 65, and my father-in-law, George, is 66, relatively young for elderly people, but both have physical disabilities, so their lifestyle needs adjustments. When Farrell was a high school student, his family experienced a traffic accident during a trip, resulting in light injuries for him but severe ones for his parents. Hazel, his mother-in-law, hurt her back, and George, his father-in-law, sustained an injury that significantly impaired the function of one of his legs. Due to the accident, his parents were forced to quit their jobs, and their lives changed dramatically. After graduating from high school, Farrell worked diligently to support both the care of his parents and their livelihood. This demonstrates how deeply he values his family. We met through a mutual friend when we were 26 years old. My first impression of Farrell was that of a sincere person who valued family above all else. He always prioritized his parents, sometimes to the point of being overprotective. At first, I was a bit concerned that he might be worrying too much, but as I learned about his past, I understood why he acted this way. His kindness and deep love for his family attracted me, and I gradually developed deep feelings for him. Our relationship deepened gradually, based on mutual understanding and support. Eventually, our relationship developed, and we got married. Through this process, Farrell has been seeking a detached house that would allow his parents to live more comfortably. Considering he is an only child and the health condition of his parents, it's easy to see that his desire is well-founded. However, I have always felt a slight reservation towards his parents, and as time passed, I began to feel that my intuition was correct. Looking back, I had a subtle sense of discomfort from the day we introduced ourselves for marriage, 3 years ago. The first time I visited his parents' home, I was greeted warmly by Hazel. "Pamela, welcome. Our home is modest, but please make yourself comfortable," she said. "Thank you, I replied as I slowly stepped inside. I noticed her struggle with walking, just as Farrell had described before. Shortly thereafter, George appeared from the back of the room. "Pamela, nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better," he said. But he staggered as he walked, clearly struggling with the burden on his leg. This showed how the traffic accident had long-term effects, making work difficult for him. However, they were managing to make ends meet with the insurance payments they received. Understanding this background, I began to realize the source of the unease I felt. Seeing their condition, I was truly glad that I had brought the pizza we had bought in advance. Despite their physical inconveniences, my in-laws tried their best to provide a warm welcome, and I was deeply grateful and wanted to reduce their burden as much as possible. When I placed the pizza on the table, Hazel exclaimed with joy, "I'm sorry for having you prepare such a wonderful treat. Thank you so much. Let's eat right away," she said, reaching for the pizza without hesitation. I was a bit surprised to see them eating so eagerly, but their genuine expressions of joy warmed my heart. At that moment, Farrell jokingly exclaimed, "Hey, both of you starting without us? We're starving over here too." Hazel quickly responded, "Oh, I'm sorry. It's just that I haven't seen such delicious-looking pizza in so long I couldn't help myself. But don't worry, there's plenty for you and Pamela too," she answered with a smile. As she did, she placed a can of emergency food on the table, saying modestly, "I'm sorry, it's just this." George also smiled and thanked her, saying, "Thanks, dear." Seeing my surprised face, Farrell asked me, "What's wrong, Pamela? You look so shocked." I hesitated and muttered, trying to find the right words, when Farrell suddenly stood up, realizing, "Oh, I forgot the drinks." "Look, I've brought them," said George, carrying a tray with glasses for everyone, walking with a bit of a stumble but making a determined effort. "Thank you, Dad, Mom. I'm sorry, I should have prepared this." As I took the tray, I was shocked. The glasses were worn and some were cracked. The contents were just water. I saw my father-in-law fetching water from the bathroom earlier. Could it really be just tap water? "Thank you" was all I could manage to say. Eventually, my in-laws ended up eating almost all of the pizza I had brought, even though I had intended for it to be shared among all of us. They were holding the pizza box, repeatedly saying it's delicious, and ate very quickly, creating an atmosphere where I felt I couldn't join in. Farrell had no problem eating the canned side dishes. I had brought the pizza wanting them to enjoy it, which was fine, but the canned food was unexpected. When I happened to pick up a can, I noticed it was nearing its expiration date. I ignored it and continued to eat silently. I could hardly taste anything. Seeing my silence, Hazel expressed concern and asked, "Did the simple meal make you feel sick?" "No, that's not it," I replied. "You can be honest with us. Farrell told us your family owns a lot of land, so you must be used to a different level of cuisine. I'm sorry, we can only provide something so modest." At first, I felt like she was being spiteful, but it seemed she genuinely believed that. I was even more confused about how to respond. "It's not like that," I replied hesitantly, as Hazel looked at me weakly. "I'm sorry. Farrell might have told you, but we are physically disabled. That prevents us from going to the supermarket often, and we can't provide as much hospitality as we'd like. It's frustrating to think about what we could do if we were more able-bodied." George nodded in agreement. Faced with their remarks, I found myself at a loss for words. "It's enough, really, thank you so much." It was clear that despite their physical limitations, my in-laws were doing their best to make us feel welcome. With their inability to work, it's understandable that their lives are more frugal. We only had canned food and tap water to make do with. Although I prepared pizza for everyone, it was somewhat unsatisfying to see it quickly consumed by just the two of them, yet Farrell didn't seem to mind, and I felt it might be inappropriate to say anything. In the end, I left their house still harboring that dissatisfaction. Later, as we progressed with our wedding plans, Farrell apologized with a serious look on his face. "I'm sorry, my parents can't contribute financially to the wedding expenses." "It's okay, we were planning to use our own savings anyway, so don't worry," I responded cheerily. I had already advised my parents to refrain from contributing too, fearing it might embarrass his parents if only one side offered financial support. Consequently, we decided to have a modest ceremony. Afterward, I received a call from Hazel. She apologized for not being able to help with the wedding expenses and said she wanted to send some home appliances as a gesture of her goodwill. Despite my reservations, she insisted on sending them. A few days later, several large cardboard boxes arrived at our house, which surprised me with their number. Upon opening them, they were packed with vintage appliances that were no longer on the market: old vacuum cleaners, a faded microwave, and other clearly well-used items. I also noticed the cracked cups and dishes that I had seen during our marriage introduction visit. All these had come from my in-laws' home. What kind of joke is this? I was at a loss for words. Seeing Farrell happily appreciating the gesture. "These appliances were used in your mother's house, weren't they? They look quite old," I pointed out reflexively. "Well, they still work, and we should be grateful," Farrell replied with a satisfied expression. Despite my surprise, as a matter of courtesy, I expressed our gratitude. I reluctantly contacted my mother-in-law. "The appliances have arrived, thank you." "Oh, they've already arrived? Those are things we've cherished for many years. I couldn't bear to throw them away, thinking they'd be useful to you newlyweds. You need appliances, right?" Her cheerful voice only increased my dissatisfaction. "However, many of them are quite worn and some do not work. We appreciate the gesture but plan to purchase new ones." "That's such a waste. It would help you save money." About saving money. "I really wanted to buy you new ones, but it's difficult for us. It's hard for us to get around, so we gave what we had at home." If they were worried about money, they didn't have to send anything. Moreover, my mother-in-law must have mentioned this to Farrell because he approached me about it. "Pamela, I heard you complained about the appliances. My parents went out of their way to send us household items. Don't take their intentions lightly. I didn't mean it that way. This made me feel like the villain. I ended up having to use the old appliances. This wasn't how I envisioned enjoying our newlywed life. It's a situation I find hard to accept. But I kept telling myself that they were considering finances in their own way. Then, Farrell proposed buying a new house. I have always dreamed of having my own home. Normally, this would be exciting news, but Farrell seems to want a home that could accommodate living with his parents in the future. I'm troubled by this idea. Reflecting on my past interactions with his parents, I feel uneasy. I wonder if it's really okay to live together, given their priority has always been saving money, which is why they sent the old appliances. Initially, I thought they were trying to help in any way they could, but I began to doubt their intentions. Later, when I visited my in-laws' house, I noticed that all their appliances had been replaced with the latest models. This raised many suspicions in my mind. I had heard they were financially struggling, but was that really true? They used to say they couldn't go shopping due to difficulty in getting around. However, nowadays, it's easy to make purchases online without needing to visit physical stores. This made me think that perhaps they just repurposed their old appliances as a wedding gift for us. I couldn't bring myself to tell Farrell, but I felt anxious that living together might force us into a frugal lifestyle. Furthermore, considering their situation, I felt that a new construction was out of the question. I was worried that they might suggest choosing a low-cost, aging house. Contrary to my concerns, they seemed to want a solidly built home. In fact, they were already looking at some properties. Seems like things are moving along, I said, perplexed. Yes, I took a drive last weekend and found a wonderful new property that I really liked. Farrell responded as if it were obvious. Why didn't you tell me about this? I felt left out and downhearted. Discussions about the house I was supposed to live in were being made without my knowledge. Feeling dissatisfied, I decided to go see the property. Farrell, his parents, and I headed to the real estate agency. On arrival, the agent quickly approached us. She was a young and attractive woman. Her business card read Linda Martin. "Ma'am, nice to meet you. I am Linda, and I'll be handling your case." Farrell had arranged a car for us to go see the property together. Inside the car, my in-laws were chatting amicably with Linda. It seems the new house is a ready-built home in a high-end area. I had a vague sense of unease. Eventually, our car stopped in front of the property. It was a luxurious single-family home with a spacious yard, clearly in an upscale neighborhood. We went inside and toured the layout while in the living room. My in-laws were very excited. "Really, this house is charming. It gets such good light," they said. Indeed. I want to start living here as soon as possible. As the conversation progressed, I felt anxious and couldn't help but interrupt. "Excuse me, but this is my first visit here." "Oh, is that so? My apologies. Here's the brochure." I was shocked when I saw the brochure. The price was clearly beyond our budget. It was likely a house we could not afford. Nevertheless, my in-laws and Farrell seemed eager to pursue this property. As I was sweating with confusion, Linda was staring at me, her expression suggesting she had something to say. Holding the brochure, I pondered how to handle the situation. Soon after, my in-laws started walking towards the terrace. Farrell joined them to provide support. They were deeply engrossed in their conversation. Then, as if she had made up her mind, Linda turned towards me and whispered quietly, "Ma, let's talk in another room. There's something about the contract we need to discuss." Surprised by her serious expression, I nodded. She led me to another room, and I was filled with anxiety. I thought she might press me to sign a contract immediately. However, what she said next was completely unexpected. "You should run away immediately." What? I was confused by her unexpected words. "What do you mean, run away?" "I'm sorry for startling you so suddenly, but I've witnessed something," she began, looking uneasy. What she revealed was shocking. It turns out that Farrell and his parents had been coming to this property previously. According to her, during those visits, his parents walked without any assistance. What does that mean? My in-laws are supposed to have difficulty walking. I couldn't understand. They always seemed to struggle with walking. That's why working was difficult for them, and shopping was a challenge. What on earth? I only managed to say that. Would you like to see for yourself? She suggested, peeking through a slightly open door to observe the three of them covertly. Indeed, my in-laws were walking on their own. They weren't using any canes or assistance. Why? Why would they pretend to be unable to walk? This could be evidence, so you should record a video, she advised. Her calm voice echoed. Evidence? What exactly? I'll explain in more detail later. Following her instructions, I shakily took out my phone and recorded a video of my in-laws walking. I just stood there, stunned. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. According to her, it seemed that my in-laws were pretending to have mobility issues. Therefore, she had recommended housing that was accessible for disabled persons. This house can have ramps installed, which would make moving around easier, she had suggested. To this, my in-laws burst into laughter. "Oh no, we don't need anything like that," they said, and started walking briskly away. She did not understand why they were deceiving her. However, the reason became clear later. When it came to providing mortgage documents, it was revealed that the contracts were being processed under my name. Here are the necessary documents. The documents clearly had my name on them. As she discreetly listened to their conversation, she overheard a shocking discussion between them. After all, it's best if Pamela pays for the loan. We've been pretending to be injured. We did receive a significant amount from the insurance, but we've almost used it up on the new appliances we bought. Mom, you're being too direct. But that's what we've been planning all along, isn't it? Find someone from a wealthy family. While my mother-in-law was nonchalant, My father-in-law also seemed satisfied. Farrell kept his promise, didn't he? Pamela trusts us completely. A kind-hearted, wealthy person is easy to manipulate. Learning the truth, I was astounded. My in-laws had deliberately pretended to have mobility issues to fraudulently receive insurance money. Farrell was aware of these facts all along. After she had let me hear that conversation between the three of them, I was silent for a while. I had never imagined that I would be the one paying the mortgage. In fact, my family owns several properties, and I had mentioned this when I first met Farrell. However, our lifestyle is very ordinary. My parents have always encouraged frugality, and we don't own expensive items. My income is not substantial. I'm just a regular office worker. I had never dreamed that being a landowner would make me a target for Farrell's advances, thinking that it meant wealth. Overwhelmed and unable to react, Linda apologized to me. I'm truly sorry for bringing this up so suddenly. No, please don't worry about it. On the contrary, I appreciate you telling me, I replied emphatically, noticing her expression darkened. The matter is not yet concluded, she continued, and what followed was even more shocking. Farrell had said, "We'll need to draw on Pamela's resources moving forward." And his mother had added, laughing, "Hey, next, give her a little nudge. I'll teach her how to pretend to fall and claim long-term medical expenses. She'll surely be delighted to learn how a little pain can bring in money." I was horrified. They intended to involve me in their fraud. What do you mean? They were speaking as if it were merely a push, but the intention was clearly to cause injury. The thought of being coaxed into committing such deceit was unforgivable. I'm sorry to bring such distressing news, but I felt it necessary to tell you. This is a clear criminal act, and it could harm you as well. She spoke with evident concern in her voice. The implications were hard to believe and even harder to accept. Witnessing the scene firsthand, I saw my in-laws walking boldly. My name was on the mortgage documents, and there was Farrell, who had deceived me. The shock made me dizzy, and I stumbled. "Are you okay?" She caught me just as I was about to fall. I had to pull myself together. As my real estate agent, she had courageously revealed the truth. I had to take some action. "Thank you, I'm fine. I was just startled by this unexpected revelation. I have no intention of engaging in fraud, and now that I know the truth, I cannot simply ignore what my in-laws are doing," I declared firmly. My determination was clear to her, and she nodded in acknowledgement. There was no time to waste. We immediately discussed the next steps to take. After that, I hurriedly left the building through a different exit while she distracted my in-laws. Using the excuse of feeling unwell, I messaged Farrell that I was heading home ahead of him. Once home, I quickly started gathering evidence. I searched online for the date and details of the accident my in-laws had mentioned, and information about the insurance company and the doctors treating them. As soon as I was prepared, I decided to notify the insurance company. I raised the issue of fraudulent claims and explained the details to their Special Investigations Unit. I also made sure to attach and send the video I had recorded today via email. As a result, the insurance company held my in-laws criminally responsible, and they were arrested. It later emerged that the injuries they had sustained in the accident were indeed minor. Nevertheless, they had exaggerated their symptoms to continue receiving insurance payouts fraudulently. Normally, insurance companies are very vigilant about the potential for fraud in cases of traffic accidents. I had been wondering how they managed to deceive the audits, but the truth was eventually revealed. Shockingly, they had conspired with a relative who was a doctor to forge medical certificates, exaggerating minor injuries as severe ones. It's unbelievable. Of course, that doctor was also arrested. This doctor had previously been flagged by the insurance company for irregularities, which led to their swift arrest, along with my in-laws. In the end, they were just a greedy family. It went beyond mere frugality. They were criminals. And Farrell, who had overlooked all this, was essentially complicit. I brought everything to light and filed for divorce. However, Farrell did not accept this and opposed it. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding and pleaded with me to at least meet his mother. I could not understand what he thought was misunderstood. I had no desire for a reunion, but there was something I still needed to say. Together with Farrell, I went to the prison where his parents were being held. Due to the gravity of their crimes, they received indefinite sentences without the option for fines. As a result, my in-laws were incarcerated. Stepping into the visiting room, I saw that his mother already looked dispirited. Separated by an acrylic panel, I fixed a sharp gaze on her. "Mother-in-law, you've been committing fraud for a long time, and you intended to involve me as well? Why would you do such a thing?" Her response was feeble. "What do you mean, such a thing? There was really an accident, and initially I truly was incapacitated. But even as my condition improved, I thought we could benefit from continuing to claim for medical expenses." I was astounded that she didn't seem to recognize the criminality of her actions. I responded firmly, "What are you talking about? That is clearly a crime. It's incomprehensible that you would coerce me into wrongdoing." At that moment, Farrell interrupted. "No, it was just an easy way to make money. It was a mistake, but I thought you'd understand, considering how your family has wealth and lives comfortably. You get it, right?" Fed up with Farrell's flippant attitude, I reached my limit. "What? Don't mix things up. Both my parents and I work honestly. We don't think about making money through crimes. This is unforgivable as a human being. Please never contact me again." At my forceful words, both Farrell and his mother were visibly shocked. The true nature of Farrell and his mother was clear. I had never imagined they were such terrible people. They only thought about making easy money and exploiting others. Even after being arrested, there was no sign of remorse. Feeling that I could no longer deal with this situation, I left Farrell behind and walked out of the prison. I would never come back here. Afterward, I proceeded with divorce mediation. It took time, but the divorce was eventually finalized. Farrell resigned from his job as his parents' arrest became known at his workplace, making it uncomfortable for him. His whereabouts are unknown to me now. Presumably, his parents are living quietly after their release. I never thought such unscrupulous people really existed. For a while, I couldn't even think about marriage. I decided to focus on my career and switch to a new job. That's when an unexpected encounter happened. I met a kind man who understood and accepted me. He understood the hardships I had experienced and offered comfort. While I hesitated about moving forward, I trusted his character. However, lessons from my previous marriage had made me cautious. He tried to alleviate those fears by introducing me to his parents. His parents warmly welcomed us and served elaborate dishes. I felt genuine joy at this seemingly ordinary kindness. His parents, too, were gentle and broad-minded, just like him. I was confident I could feel safe with this family. As a result, we got married and were able to lead a peaceful life. Over time, the topic of buying a house came up between my husband and me. I took him to the real estate agency I recommended. It was the agency where Linda worked. Thanks to her support, I was able to see through the deception before, and I am deeply grateful for it. As we entered the real estate agency, a familiar face greeted us. "Welcome." "Oh!" She seemed to have recognized us. I responded with a smile. "Hello? It's been a while." She was as energetic as ever. The new business card she handed me had Chief written on it. Feeling her growth and experience brought me genuine happiness. When my husband was not around, she kindly said, "It's really great that you found a good partner. I'm really grateful that you told me the truth back then." "Thank you." My smile widened. We decided to build our new house through this real estate agency where she works. It was a decision made after wanting to somehow repay her. I'm sure this time, my ideal home will be realized. Thinking about our new home naturally brought a smile to my face.
"Take this and get out of here," my mother-in-law shouted as she handed over divorce papers. She, who believes I'm just a housewife, has become very aggressive. I feel pity for her, being deceived by my husband's lies. I took the divorce papers, struggling to hold back laughter, and left the house. I wonder what will happen next. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm Kelly, and I am 26 years old. I've launched an online education business to help people learn skills that will allow them to work from home. That's right. I'm the CEO. Most of the business is left to my employees, and I currently work at my own pace from home. I married Brian 2 years ago. Brian tells people that he has an important position at a major company, but he's actually just a contract worker doing odd jobs there. Moreover, he's been telling people I'm a housewife. He says, although she does have an income, she's hardly active, so it's basically the same as being a housewife. At home, Brian treats me as a simple housewife and doesn't help with the household chores at all, even though I'm also working when he's at work. But Brian doesn't seem to understand that at all. He says, out of respect for your husband, I want you to forgive my white lie. But because of these lies, I'm harassed by my mother-in-law, Brian, who excels at his job and is our pride. Why did he marry a jobless woman like you? My mother-in-law, misunderstanding and thinking I'm just a housewife, often visits unannounced and criticizes me like this. I've repeatedly explained to her that I go to work and do the household chores too, but she just mocks me in response. You're really just relaxing all day, aren't you? And what's with this housework? If you're going to tell a lie, at least try to make it convincing. Of course, I've talked to Brian about her sudden visits, but he just says, just ignore what an old person with time on their hands says. It seems like it's not really his concern. He only contributes $500 to our household expenses, keeping the rest for himself. I pay the rent and add about $4,500 to our household budget, but it's still not enough each month. Brian spends it recklessly. Despite the fact that I am the one supporting the household, he lies to others saying that I don't work and doesn't protect me from my mother-in-law's sarcasm. However, I haven't been able to bring myself to decide on divorce. That's because Brian once supported me. Brian and I were classmates in college. Back then, I was tormented by Allison, a dominating woman. She disliked that I was thought of as better than her, despite being modest. I think it's natural for someone who studies hard to be evaluated highly, but Allison didn't seem to think so. Because of Allison's childish harassment, there was a time I even hated going to college, but I managed to graduate thanks to Brian's support. He also helped me launch my online school business. When I almost broke down from overwork at a busy company after graduating, he encouraged me, saying, "Why not do a job that utilizes your strengths? You can do well by yourself." Thanks to his support, I was able to achieve a work style not bound by time and place. I am who I am now because of Brian's support. That's why I think I have to put up with him a little. I'd like a divorce, but can I really go through with it? I was pondering this when I accidentally found something shocking on SNS. I stumbled across a post that read, "My beloved boyfriend bought me the latest brand bag," accompanied by a photo of a luxury bag and a man's hand. The man was wearing a luxury brand watch, the same model I had given to Brian, a limited edition. The user who posted this was, could it be Allison? I'm not connected with Allison on SNS, but because we have mutual acquaintances, her posts often appear in my recommendations. Looking at her past posts, there are several suggestive photos that indicate it's Brian. Allison must know that Brian and I are married. Because of our many mutual acquaintances on social media, it's highly likely she's seen my posts. And yet, she dares to post such photos. Is this a challenge to me, or just thoughtlessness? Either way, she's clearly underestimating me. I've been grateful to Brian and have put up with a lot, but I can't forgive infidelity. With this, I finally feel ready to decide on divorce. I immediately contacted a detective agency to investigate Brian. They soon found a lot of obvious evidence. Brian said he was attending a business school to become a full-time employee, but in reality, he wasn't attending at all, just hanging out with Allison instead, and using my money to do so. To think, an affair with Allison. Though somewhat surprised, I felt disappointment rather than anger and a strong sense of relief at the chance for divorce. I secretly signed a lease for a new apartment to live alone and started moving my belongings little by little, preparing for the divorce. When I was almost ready, Brian cheerfully said, "I've been selected to participate in an employee training camp. I'll be gone for a week from next week." I knew the reality was that he was planning a luxurious trip with Allison, and that this was just another lie. I was anticipating what excuse he would use. It's rare for a contract employee to participate in an employee training camp, but it sounded plausible enough. Classic Brian, a master of lies, I thought as I calmly observed him talking about how wonderful the training camp would be. Time passed, and Brian happily left for his so-called training trip. I was planning to finalize my divorce preparations, but the moment I started packing, the doorbell rang. It was my mother-in-law at the intercom, visiting and announced again. "Look, Kelly, Brian gave me this as a present." She barged in, showing off the same luxury brand handbag Allison had posted on social media. "This is the latest model. He said it's a thank you for always helping out." "What has Brian given you recently, Kelly?" she asked. I had no choice but to reply, "Actually, I haven't received anything." "Of course you haven't. You're living off Brian's earnings without doing anything after all. You don't deserve presents, do you?" she mocked. She joyfully talked about receiving the latest appliances and how Brian had paid for renovations at her house. All with my money. The money I put towards the household expenses was being filtered to my mother-in-law and Allison. However, I mostly manage my income separately, so it's not a big problem. I ignored her words, but she seemed displeased and demanded, "Kelly, are you listening?" I reflexively replied, "What do you mean?" Her face turned red with anger. "How rude of you to ignore me," she yelled, and to my surprise, she took out a set of already completed divorce papers from her bag. "I never liked you. Living comfortably off Brian's earnings without doing anything. What kind of wife are you? Have some shame," she screamed, throwing a pen at me. "You've been living for free as a wife all this time. Sign this and divorce from Brian right now. We can manage economically without you. In fact, it'll be a saving for us," she shouted sarcastically. It seems that she had been urging Brian to divorce me for some time. She probably came today to find a reason to blame me. I didn't expect her to be so prepared with divorce papers, though. "Hurry up and sign this, and then get out," she demanded sternly. I felt sorry for her, being deceived by Brian's lies and about to let go of her cash cow. I signed the divorce papers, holding back laughter, packed my prepared belongings, and said, "Thank you for everything. I'll submit these papers myself." Then, I left the house. She must have thought I would beg her. She just watched me leave calmly, surprised, muttering, "Lucky me, one less trouble in my life." I immediately submitted the divorce papers to City Hall. Humming a tune, I headed straight to the luxury apartment I had prepared, which cost $3 million, a secret from Brian and his mother. Living alone was very comfortable. I no longer needed to take care of Brian or deal with his mother. I could use all my time for myself, and as a result, started a personal business. I was enjoying my newfound single life, but unfortunately, this peace didn't last long. It seemed that Brian had returned from his affair trip, which he had disguised as a training camp. When he realized I wasn't home, he called me. "Kelly, where the hell are you? Whatever it is, come back right now." "Why should I come back? Your mother told me to leave, so I did as she wished." "My mom? I told you to ignore whatever she says. Just come back, no complaints." "No, I don't want to. We're divorced now. I won't return to a legal stranger's house." "What? Divorce? What are you talking about?" "Your mother prepared the divorce papers. I just signed and submitted them to City Hall. I filed them the day you left, so the process is already complete. This divorce is invalid. Just come back. There's only $500 in the account, and I can't make ends meet." I said no. "Since we're divorced, I'm not concerned about your living expenses. If you want to talk in the future, please go through my lawyer. The contact information is in my desk drawer." I ended the call and turned off my phone. Brian had just kept saying, "Come home." I wonder what will happen next. I'm excited to see. A few days later, Brian, through a lawyer, requested a formal discussion. When I arrived at the lawyer's office on the day of the meeting, unexpectedly, his mother was also there. Seeing me, she murmured, "That bag." Noticing the more luxurious bag I was carrying compared to the one that she had bragged about. "You have a good eye, mother. When you have money, you want to have at least one of these. By the way, why are you here?" I asked, and she looked down. "Mom knows everything. That I'm actually a contract worker, that you're running a company, and that you were covering most of the household expenses." Brian began quietly, looking embarrassed. "The divorce papers were prepared by my mother without my consent. I regret what I did, and it's my fault for lying in the first place. I won't let her say bad things about you anymore, so please come back and cancel the divorce." He seemed repentant, but it didn't resonate with me. In reality, it was just lip service. I know he didn't think that he had done anything wrong. He seemed to insist that his mother was the worst in this, and that he was not to blame. "I'm sorry. I can't come back." When I refused, Brian slammed the desk, It's thanks to me that you became a CEO. Don't you have any gratitude? Since you're divorcing me because of your selfishness, I demand $1 million as compensation. He yelled. This was his true nature. The Brian I once loved no longer existed. In front of me was a pitiful man swayed by money. Brian, don't say that. His mother tried to stop him, but he seemed lost and didn't listen. Lawyer. When I had come home, Kelly had taken all the belongings and disappeared. The divorce papers were made without my consent by my mother. Kelly's the one who abandoned all her duties as a wife and caused mental harm to my mother and I. Brian pointed at me and appealed to the lawyer. The lawyer sighed in disbelief and pulled out a document. Kelly has said that she will accept the divorce quietly and won't pursue this matter further, the tired lawyer stated. Brian was shocked and speechless when he saw the document. It detailed his relationship with Allison, including photos of him entering and leaving hotels with her. I'm grateful for your support in running the company, but I've repaid my debt. You enjoyed a luxurious life with my funds, spoiling your mother and having a good time with your lover. I was surprised it was Allison. How was your luxurious trip with the woman who tormented me? I asked Brian this, but he was pale and seemingly frozen. His mother, unaware of the affair, started causing a scene. What is this? What does this mean? Ignoring her, I continued explaining to Brian, if the divorce goes through, I won't ask for any damages from you, or for you to return the living expenses you overspent. However, there will be no division of assets. His mother interrupted, that's unacceptable. Kelly, actually, I've started renovating our family home. I thought Brian was controlling the finances. And I've also bought new furniture and appliances. Brian can't make a living in his current state. So, please reconsider the divorce. If not, please help us financially. Brian's mother put forth her unreasonable demand. I was astonished, and so was the lawyer. The lawyer took a deep breath and said, well, that's quite audacious, or rather thoughtless. Madam, you have no right to interfere in this matter. Can you please remain quiet? He then turned back to Brian. So, what will you do? If you continue to make a fuss, we'll claim damages and also reimbursement for the shared assets you squandered on your mistress. I'll send this evidence to your company as well. My additional remark made Brian slump in resignation. Then I have no choice but to accept the divorce. He answered in a weak voice. Brian, a contract employee, but proud to be part of a large corporation, indulging in luxury with his wife's money, and worse, having an affair that could lead to job loss if exposed at his company. Wanting to maintain his corporate status, Brian reluctantly agreed to the terms. What about the house renovation? The credit card payment is due soon. Brian, answer me. His mother pressed, but Brian stood up silently, walked out unsteadily, and left the lawyer's office. His mother hastily followed him. I stared at the door they left through, deep in thought. Later, I sent the evidence of Brian's affair to Allison and sought damages from her. Oops, caught me. But Brian's mine now. I'll pay the damages, whatever they are. He's an elite at a big corporation. Allison laughed without a hint of remorse. Apparently, Brian had lied to Allison as well. He told our college friends that I was the CEO, but it seems that Allison didn't know this. When I informed Allison of the actual facts, her smug expression changed as she learned the truth. Initially doubtful, Allison then claimed, but this means that I was deceived by Brian. I'm the real victim, and you couldn't possibly go against me. But her affair with Brian was a fact. If you don't pay the damages, I'll send this evidence to your workplace and family, I pressed, and she quickly settled the payment. According to my friends, Allison tends to involve herself with married men and was already caught up in another compensation issue. But whatever happens to her is now none of my concern. Brian still sends me messages hoping for reconciliation. Unable to pay rent and returning to his family, Brian and his mother struggled to lower their living standards, quickly accruing significant debts on top of existing loans. overworked and sleep-deprived from his job and other part-time work. Brian reportedly kept making mistakes at work. Brian sent me a message that made me laugh. "I've come to understand how much I value you, Kelly. I won't repeat the same mistakes. So let's support each other from now on." I have no memory of receiving any support from Brian after our marriage, so his idea of mutual support is completely mistaken. When I warned through my lawyer that further contact would lead to sending evidence of the affair to his workplace, his messages stopped completely. I'm currently working happily while expanding my business. I have no intention of remarrying for the time being, and I plan to enjoy my single life. This is unbelievable. Did you really just come back for the money? Of course. And it's not unbelievable at all. It's only natural that the beloved grandchild spends money, so it's only right that I be thanked by both grandparents like this. That's why Grandma needs to leave this world sooner. What are you saying? Grandma is asleep right over there. Hey Grandma, can you hear me? Just go already so I can get the inheritance. How could such heartless words be thrown at the grandmother who raised her? I was disturbed to hear such words that made me doubt her heart. Rewind back 20 years ago. My sister Theresa and I, Nicole, had no parents. Apparently they died in an unexpected accident, shortly after I was born. So I only know my parents' faces from photographs. The ones who took us in after we became orphans were our grandparents, my mother's parents. They showered us with unconditional love, but Theresa disliked being raised by them. When she went to junior high, she became so rebellious and was out of control to the point where our grandparents frequently had to apologize for her. She even found that annoying and told our grandparents in no uncertain terms to never show their faces at school events again. Eventually, right about the time that Theresa graduated from university, she took money from grandfather without a word of thanks and left home. I decided to repay our grandparents, including my selfish sister's portion, and continued to live with them even after graduating from university. I planned to take care of our grandparents in the future, so I looked for a job locally and found employment. Since Theresa left, several years have gone by. With the troublesome Theresa gone, my grandparents and I were living peacefully, but suddenly, that happiness crumbled. It was discovered that Grandma had cancer, and we were told that she wouldn't live much longer. I was faced with the reality that Grandma's time was near, and I couldn't help but cry. Grandma comforted me gently. "Nicole, you're so kind. I'm moved by your tears, but I've lived long enough." Grandma always treated my sister and I kinder than anyone else. Encouraged by her words, I was determined to take care of her properly until the last moment. Feeling that Theresa should know, I emailed her about Grandma's cancer. Theresa, who usually never replied to our messages, would surely contact us if she knew about Grandma's condition, or at least I hoped. But that hope was in vain. There wasn't even a reply from Theresa, let alone her coming to see Grandma. Grandma's health deteriorated rapidly. It was clear to me that Grandma didn't have much longer, and while holding back tears, I prepared myself for the inevitable farewell. To show my gratitude, I always kept a smile in front of Grandma and took devoted care of her with Grandpa. Despite the complete lack of communication from Theresa, I continued to update her daily through email for the sake of Grandma, who had always cared about Theresa. Even though Theresa disregarded our grandparents, I kept sending messages hoping to at least show Grandma Theresa's face before the end. Then, after many days had passed, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Theresa, who hadn't been in touch for so long. Next to her stood a man with a flashy appearance, a stranger to me. Seeing my perplexed look, Theresa pointed to the man with irritation and bluntly said, "I got married. This is my husband. I'm Scott," he said with a brief greeting, and without hesitation, Theresa and this Scott walked boldly into the house. Seeing Theresa, who had returned home after such a long absence, Grandpa, who had been relaxing in the living room, exclaimed in surprise, "Theresa, you're back." Sitting on the living room sofa, Theresa asked arrogantly, "So what? How much does Grandma's inheritance come to?" I was so surprised that I couldn't help but speak up. I thought Theresa came to see Grandma, but she seemed to be only interested in the money. So, how much is it exactly? Theresa asked again. Scott, sitting next to her, turned to Grandpa and said, "Oh, Grandpa, I'm thirsty," hinting he wanted a drink. Disgusted by the selfish behavior of the couple, I shook my head and said, "I don't know how much. Besides, it's rude to talk about inheritance when Grandma is still fighting for her life. You know Grandma has a fortune, Nicole. If we don't get it sorted while she's alive, we won't get anything, will we?" True. Grandma came from a distinguished family, and her estate had accumulated considerable wealth. That wealth was built because Grandma's father, my great-grandfather, ran a company. Grandma had siblings, and though she never took over the family business, she seemed to have learned about management from her father since she was young. Therefore, after marrying Grandpa, it seems they started a business in Grandma's name and built a fortune worth millions. Theresa and Scott were after that business worth a fortune. This is unbelievable. Did you really just come back for the money? Of course. And it's not unbelievable at all. It's only natural that the beloved grandchild spends money, so it's only right that I be thanked by both grandparents like this. Plus, I'm pregnant. If Grandma leaves this world soon, we can inherit the fortune, and it will even go to her great-grandchild. It's obvious she would be happy about that. What are you saying? Grandma is asleep right over there. The room next to the living room, once Grandpa's workspace, had been converted into a care room for Grandma, who had difficulty moving daily, and our voices were surely reaching her. I explained to Theresa and said, "Don't talk about the money anymore," but she laughed maliciously and shouted even louder. "Hey Grandma, can you hear me? Just go already so I can get the inheritance." That was the last straw for me. "Get out," I yelled as I grabbed Theresa and Scott's arms and dragged them to the door. In my anger, I mustered all my strength and threw both Theresa and Scott, who showed little resistance, out of the house. "Never set foot in this house again. You're being selfish." "I came because you told me to," Theresa mocked. Steam seemed to pour from my head as I shouted back, "If you're going to say such horrible things to Grandma and Grandpa, I wish you had never come. You forget your gratitude and say such cruel words, despite being raised by them so kindly. You're the worst." After slamming the door shut, I bawled in frustration. Grandpa, who had brought juice at Scott's request, noticed me crying at the door. "Are you okay?" When I told Grandpa about Theresa and Scott's actions, he seemed to consider something quietly, then smiled kindly and said, "Don't worry. Grandpa will take care of it," and handed me the juice he was carrying. Time went by, and after a long battle with her illness, Grandma left us. The peacefully sleeping Grandma seemed finally free from the pain of cancer, which eased my feelings a bit. I felt relieved to see Grandma, as if she were sleeping with a peaceful look on her face, finally free from the pain of cancer. I spoke to Grandma's serene face. "You did well, Grandma. Thank you for everything." After the funeral, I returned home to find Theresa and Scott waiting. I had informed them of Grandma's death by email, but they had not shown up at the funeral. When I asked Theresa why they came now, she predictably replied, "It's for the money, of course." We needed to discuss the matter of Grandma's will, so we went into the house and started talking about the inheritance. I was hesitant to talk about the inheritance so soon after Grandma's death, but it seemed Theresa and Scott were eager to get the money as quickly as possible. Theresa pulled out a document from the envelope she brought with a pleased look on her face. "Look at this. It's Grandma's will." "What?" I couldn't help but let out a sound of surprise. But there it was, a will undoubtedly written in Grandma's handwriting. What's more, the content was unbelievable, stating that all the inheritance, including the company, was to be left to Theresa. That was impossible to believe. On the day Theresa visited, Grandma had heard Theresa's cold words and cried in her room. It seems Theresa sees me only as a source of money. Even though Grandma had said such in a sad tone, the will was leaving all her assets to Theresa. I trembled as I muttered, "What is this? Some kind of joke?" To which Scott chuckled. "Based on your surprised face, I guess you were after the inheritance too, weren't you? You really make me laugh. I don't care about the inheritance. I just can't believe that this will was actually written by Grandma. As I looked at the will with disbelief, Scott mocked, "Don't act like such a goody two-shoes," and Theresa said sarcastically, "She's always been like this. Last time, we were kicked out, but now this house, Grandma's company, and the rest of her assets will be mine, so it's your turn to leave. Grandpa can't stay here either, so take him with you and go." Theresa said this while grabbing my arm and pulled me towards the door. I was overwhelmed by the anger I felt towards Theresa and Scott. Despite Grandma looking lonely at the time, Theresa didn't even show her face. Then she showed up wishing for Grandma to pass away quickly, and now she was about to take all the inheritance. I felt ready to explode. "Stop it!" I cried out, and just then the doorbell rang. Surprised, Theresa loosened her grip on me and I pushed her hand away, looking towards the door. There, I could see a shadow through the frosted glass. When I opened the door, I found Mr. Harrington, the lawyer. Mr. Harrington had visited our house many times before for consultations related to our grandparents' company. "Sorry I'm late," Mr. Harrington greeted, and Grandpa, who had been preparing coffee, welcomed him. We've been waiting." "Okay, let's discuss the will," Grandpa began, but Theresa cut in, showing the will that she had brought. "As it's written here, I've acquired everything, including the company and Grandma's wealth. So actually, the will is already settled. The money has already been deposited in the bank, and I've even withdrawn it," Theresa said confidently. However, Grandpa remained calm and said with a gentle smile, "There's still more to discuss. Theresa, you no longer have the right to inherit the estate." "What?" Theresa looked confused, and frankly, I was also struggling to keep up with the situation. That's when Mr. Harrington inserted a USB memory stick into his laptop and placed it on the shoe cabinet near the front door. A voice recording of Grandma, Theresa, and Scott began to play from the PC. "Come on, hurry up and write the will, Grandma. Write that you will leave all your assets to us. Otherwise, things will get complicated." Understood. As we listened to the recording, it was easy to imagine Theresa and Scott pressuring Grandma to create the will. After stopping the recording, Mr. Harrington explained, "A will made under duress is invalid according to the Civil Code. Therefore, this will has no legal power." Mr. Harrington said this, pointing to the will Theresa was holding. "When did you set this up?" Unable to hide my surprise, Grandpa explained the situation to me. While I was out, Theresa and Scott had come to the house and coerced Grandma into writing this will. "I was the one who set up the voice recorder," Grandpa said with a calm smile. Theresa started to panic and muttered, "But Grandma had me sign the documents too," to which Grandpa replied by chuckling. "Theresa, you really don't understand anything, do you? Did you read the fine print? What you signed was a credit card loan application. Grandma was shocked that you signed it so easily." "What? So the $20,000 I withdrew from the bank is?" "Yes, a debt," Grandpa replied calmly, and Theresa hurriedly took out her mobile phone to check her account. "I can't believe it. My account is in the negative." As she checked her account online, Theresa muttered to herself and began to look pale. Scott was no different. "What do you mean, minus? What are we going to do? I thought we were going to get the inheritance. So I've already taken out loans for the house and car." "This isn't a joke." Scott raised his voice. "Calm down, Scott. Mr. Harrington, as I am Grandma's granddaughter. Even if the inheritance is less than we thought, I will still receive some, right?" Theresa pleaded desperately. To this, Mr. Harrington replied, "I came here to convey just that." And he took out a will from a white envelope. "This is a legitimate will based on a notarized document. It's valid, so I will read the contents." He said this as he took the will out from the envelope. Theresa and Scott both put their hands together as if in prayer. However, the will did not mention Theresa's name at all. The company was to be inherited by Grandpa, and the remaining assets were to be shared between Grandpa and myself. Theresa cried out desperately, "Why? Can't we do something about this?" But Mr. Harrington replied coolly, "Nothing can be done. Legally, Theresa, as an heir, had the right to claim the inheritance, but she lost that right by threatening Grandma. To Theresa's question, "Can't we do something about this?" Grandpa smiled dryly and said, "No, there's nothing that can be done. You senile old man." Theresa spat before storming out of the house alone. Scott, who had been left behind, hurried after her, calling, "Wait for me," but he was a pitiable sight. Later, I heard that Theresa and Scott had a child, but because of the debt they accumulated, they were unable to take enough parental leave and had to return to work without a break. It seems they had expected to receive a substantial inheritance before Grandma's death and had indulged in luxuries, even going into debt. However, as a result, they were forced to sell their expensive house and luxury car they had bought on loans, and all that remained was a massive debt and the brutal task of repaying it. Theresa and Scott once came begging for help, but Grandpa turned them away coldly. The financial difficulties took a toll on their marriage, and eventually, they divorced. I heard that Scott returned to his parents' home, and Theresa tried to come back to this house, but I refused her firmly. "This house is my property, inherited from Grandma, and I won't allow Theresa to live here without my permission." I heard a rumor that Theresa was living under a bridge, financially ruined, but the truth is that her current situation is uncertain. She repeatedly requested my help, but because I couldn't really afford to support her, I continued to tell her, "It's impossible." In truth, the inheritance I received from Grandma had already been donated to a children's home. Having lost our parents at an early age, I could deeply empathize with the orphans. If it weren't for my grandparents, Theresa and I would probably have been raised in such a facility, so I donated, hoping to bring a little happiness to the children there. When Theresa came asking for help, I told her about the donation. She was very surprised and said, "You should help your own family first," but recalling her past, I had no intention of helping her. Time went by, I got married and was blessed with children. Grandpa seemed content with my happy life and passed away without suffering. Losing Grandpa felt like a hole had opened in my heart, but with the support of my loving husband, I was able to face the world again. Now, I continue my grandparents' legacy, working as a company president and struggling with parenting. I hope to live in a way that would make my grandparents proud, watching over me from heaven.